Joining Ben Miller today on this episode of Onward is Kanika Bahl. Kanika is a former founding member of Anthropic's Long-Term Benefit Trust, the body with the authority to select a majority of Anthropic's board, and the former CEO of Evidence Action. She's now building the AI Access Initiative around a question nobody inside the trust had a good answer for. If transformative AI arrives in the next 5 to 10 years, who makes sure the 3.5 billion people living in poverty aren't left behind? Before we get started, we want to remind you that this podcast is provided for informational and entertainment purposes only. It does not constitute investment advice or recommendations to buy or sell any security. Also, Fundrise funds may have invested in the company and therefore has a financial interest in their success. Any discussion of a portfolio company is not intended to imply that the investment will or will not be profitable, or that the company is representative of all investments held by the fund. Past performance is not indicative of future results.
Hey, Kanika Bahl, welcome to Onward.
Thank you, Ben. Good to be here.
So I'm excited to dive into this because you have I think a unique point of view. I think of you as an insider and an outsider. And so you bring that that combination, which is rare. And so I wanted to just start, but maybe you could just give everybody a little bit of your bio, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, that sounds great. So I'm a founding member of Anthropic's Long-Term Benefit Trust. So that's an independent governance body. It was created with the authority to select a majority of Anthropic's board. And it was really designed to ensure that the company developed AI for the long-term benefit of humanity. And so I started that role when Anthropic was valued at about $5 billion. And I was there through its growth to a $380 billion company. So a period of really rapid growth and transformation. And then simultaneously, I was the CEO of Evidence Action. And Evidence Action reached 530 million people. And it really focused on health and economic interventions based on really sound evidence that could massively improve people's lives. And so to put that in perspective, we reached 1 in 7 people living in poverty today and drove something like $23 billion in productivity gains. So really the focus was on scale. And so I was simultaneously on the Anthropic Trust. So I had a front row seat to what is arguably the most consequential technology and how quickly it was moving. And then wearing my Evidence Action hat, I kept returning to this really core question, and there wasn't a good answer, which is, if transformative AI arrives in the next 5, 10 years, who ensures that the 3.5 billion people living in poverty aren't left behind? And so taken together, that turned into a new organization that I've started, the AI Access Initiative to AI. And this is a nonprofit. We're focused on ensuring the benefits of AI in health, income generation, education, reach tens or hundreds of millions of people in lower middle income countries. And I know we'll chat more about that later, Ben. And then just to round out, before that, I was at the Clinton Health Access Initiative. I built out operations across 17 countries and drove an 80% reduction in HIV/AIDS drug prices. And to put that in context, when I joined, this was around the mid-2000s, 2.4 million people were dying of AIDS in sub-Saharan Africa. The drugs existed, they worked, but less than 5% of people who needed treatment could access it. And the problem wasn't science, it was coordination across those countries, negotiating with the manufacturers and pricing. And that's what unlocked scale. I just wanted to spend a second on that because it was the most urgent work I've ever done until now. And I would also say it really highlighted a common theme of my work, which is when it comes to reaching the poor, the best breakthroughs aren't what you invent. It's not the HIV/AIDS drugs. I don't even think it's the AI. It's actually how you reach those people. And so that's the focus of the AI Access Initiative. In this case, applied to, I think, the most powerful technology ever created.
Yeah, there's so much about your career, which is why I want to have you on the show, that addresses a lot of the fear about AI is about access, about distribution, who gets the gains, how's it going to change people's lives and jobs. And in a way, you've been addressing that question, not with AI, but with like, just wealth and access to, like you said, life-saving medical technology. This has been a question you've been working on for your whole career. So it's a different technology, but it's still the same question about who benefits, how do they benefit, and how do you make sure they benefit?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Ben. When we look at it, even really simple health technologies in the developing world can take up to 20 years to get to scale versus 1 or 2 years in the developed world. And that's really simple things. That's like a shot in arms for a child. And now when we're talking about embedding AI into national systems, it's just a different level of complexity. And I think just assuming that that is going to happen is a really, really grave mistake.
So, the idea I'm trying to flesh out here, and having you as sort of the founding guest, is to try to answer this question that most people aren't asking, which is that, what happens after AI? I think most people are asking the question of like, will AI, get to scale? Will it be transformative? Will it end up like, replacing human jobs, things like that? I think I want to accept the premise that AI is going to get to, whatever called artificial general intelligence or artificial super intelligence. It gets to a level that's comparable or better than people. I want to accept that and then say, okay, now what? Because I think the now what has gotten much less thinking. And I want to do that. But before we do that, I wanted you to help me get the audience to get us there. Because I think accepting the premise is going to be something that's like hard for people to swallow, because it seems like, I think a lot of people are skeptical at the moment. So how would you help me get there? You've been in the room with a lot of AI, scientists and researchers. And so what makes you think that could be true?
So I'd say when I first started on the Anthropic Trust in, I think it was mid 2023, AI was a black box to me, right? And why these assertions were being made weren't entirely clear. And I went through a lot of training, a lot of learning, and I think just to break it down, I came to actually see like how this is based on pretty reasonable hypotheses and empirical data. So in terms of why people think various labs and others think AGI might be coming or something approximating it, the core belief really, in my experience, rests on something called scaling laws. And it's basically the observation that as you add more compute, more data, and better model architecture, AI just gets reliably better at essentially every cognitive task. It's not linear, but it's pretty consistent. And that curve is held for a decade. I think we're actually starting to see this. Obviously the improvements are showing up in the real world. AI is now writing a lot of code at labs like Anthropic. But I also think there's other tests which are happening that are interesting. So there's this research organization called Meter, and they track one specific measure of pace, which is the length of software engineering tasks that an AI agent can complete autonomously with 50% reliability. In 2019, it could do 2 seconds of work. Today, Meter has had to come out and say it's hard to actually use a benchmark because they're at 16 hours and it's getting unreliable because the tasks aren't hard enough. And so basically to do that, AI capabilities for several years were doubling every 7 months. Since 2023, it's compressed to 4 months. And now it's been doubling roughly 3 months. And someone was telling me the other day, I've not confirmed this, that it was something like 6 weeks. And so the doubling trajectory is moving up faster and faster. And the reasons behind it are pretty, I think, quite intuitive. I talked about one of the factors being compute. We have about $450 billion that was spent by the five major tech companies on AI, and that was mostly for compute, data centers, chips, power infrastructure, So you have a lot of money going to this. You now have AI itself generating the code, and that actually acts as a force multiplier across the compute, the data, and the architecture simultaneously because you can make the compute more efficient. You can do training faster to improve the architecture. It's like a massive team of very, very low cost, very, very fast engineers who never need to sleep, right? And so I think that's why you're seeing this, the combination of the scaling laws with the force multiplier of the increasing ability of AI itself to do the coding is leading to this massive increase in capabilities and this, exponential increase in what AI can do.
Yeah, let me try to drill down on that a little bit because I think we're trying to move past this debate, but so I want to do that by talking about a few people you may know who have moved past skepticism. So you must know people, probably at the AI labs, who are absolute conviction that we're getting to AGI or maybe ASI. So when you talk to them, and maybe you have that conviction too, like what is different about their thinking? Like, this is like a very kind of wild idea. And so, one way, a lot of times people make decisions not by actually knowing themselves. They just see somebody who they know knows and then follow what they do. There's like a modeling aspect to it. So when you talk to those people, like what convinced them?
I really think it's pretty careful empiricism, Ben, right? Like it's looking at if you believe the scaling laws, which by the way could break, right? That's always a possibility. And even the most serious believers I have encountered recognize that could happen. Um, but it's really the scaling laws are if you have more compute, if you have more data, and if you have better architecture, then the models improve. And we are just pouring massive, massive investments into those factors, right? Particularly the compute, but also the training and the architecture. And then if you have, again, AI itself that is more and more capable of driving improvements across those three factors, I don't want to sound simplistic. Like in my head, not an engineer, but a math econ person, like it's just math, right? And so it's both that factor combined with the fact that like we are genuinely seeing exponential increases in the capabilities of AI. It's not that it's gotten so good that we're now starting to see a slowing in its capabilities. We're actually seeing that like go faster and faster. I can talk about why that might not be true. I don't want to sound like I'm making the case sort of from someone who uh, as to why, to me, it seems like a pretty rational assumption. Um, the other thing I would say, actually, Ben, and then I come to the counter if that's helpful. The other thing I would say is that maybe I have been in the room many times where I was just like, that just seems like a fantastical assertion. Like that is not going to happen by X
Mm-hmm.
time period. And then by X time period, give or take a few months, like X happened. And so I also think it's increased my belief that there is just real grounding behind a lot of these forecasts. That's much more anecdotal.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I was trying to get at by my question that maybe wasn't as elegant as it could have been. That when you're saying we've seen this exponential growth, it's really like you have, and some people close to it, but like my mom hasn't, right? Like, it's a lot of people aren't really seeing it change their daily lives. And so it seems, as you said, fantastical that this thing would all of a sudden become artificial life, artificial intelligence of at a level that's comparable or better than people. And then why I want to move to the accept the premises is that like that scares people. And most people actually think that's a negative.
Yes. Yeah. And just one other, like, this is an anecdotal thing, but yes, I have seen it. And also, if you actually take a step back, when was ChatGPT 3? I should have introduced.
20
Was it 2022,
oh 20 in
2023?
November 2022,
22.
I think. Yeah.
And at the time, I remember me and all my friends thought it was so cool that it could like write a fun bedtime story that was pretty short for a kid, right? I remember being like unicorns and whatever, and that seemed like a big deal. And now it's doing coding for like the biggest firms in the world, right? It is, if you think about the objective capabilities of that seeming like just blew everyone's minds when it happened to where we are today with the capabilities. I actually think it's happening, but if you don't understand the underlying factors, maybe it's not as clear to connect the dots in terms of like what that means in underlying capabilities.
Yeah. And so this question or this like explanation that you've gone into, I think that's where most people's energy is, and that's why I want to move past it and say, okay, you know what, it's happened. Anthropic was right. OpenAI was right. We end up having they call it AGI or ASI, but for normal people, it would essentially be human-like intelligence in a machine, or beyond human-like intelligence. So what now? What does that mean? Like, is everybody out of a job? Does it just mean, 10 people are worth 100 trillion, everyone else is impoverished? I feel like you actually have a lot of firsthand experience dealing with, okay, there's some people who have a lot of wealth. Probably your funders have worth billions, or maybe you have funders even worth more than that. And you going to subsistence farmers who live on $1 a day, and you're trying to help them. And you're genuinely trying to help, right? But I can see it be causing resentment. I can see it being very difficult from a social point of view. Like, is that the right way to think about this? Or is that just totally the wrong way to frame, this, like, is AI like that much further ahead of most people? And it's really like this patriarchal dynamic.
My hope then is that it's not, right? And that we have an ability to shape how it moves forward and how it develops. And so that's such a big question. And I think maybe I'll start with just how I think about it for the global South and for lower middle income countries, right? Africa, Asia, Latin America. There was a point in the trust where I think this was maybe like a year and a half ago.
Anthropic's trust, you're saying?
Oh, sorry, the Anthropic Trust. Yes, in the Anthropic Trust, where the leadership of Anthropic and the board the trust started discussing, how do we actually ensure AI benefits 3.5 billion people living in poverty? And it was myself, it was several other international development leaders, and we didn't have a good answer. And that seemed really deeply troubling to me. But I went home, I talked to my husband about it. I'm like, what do I do? And I felt this like sense of responsibility, but also kind of surprised that nothing was happening, and asked myself, what should we do? And so I basically said, okay, well, I want to look at this really rigorously and in an evidence-based way and say, what can we do? What is possible that could change the outcomes for these countries? And so, I assembled a team of experts, Dario himself, there's a Nobel laureate, Michael Kramer, who's amazing, Kent Walker, who's a president at Google, all signed on as formal advisors. I sourced 50 ideas from very talented, academics, philanthropists, NGOs, others. And I said, what's AI enabled? What's scalable? What's evidence-based? What will be cost effective? And then we put it through a process where we looked at all of those things and we got down to 10. And then we said, we really, want to focus on 3 big bets that could improve the lives of tens, hundreds of millions of people. And I started the work being like, are there actually things we're going to want to do, right? Are there things that could transform people's lives? And the exciting news was there were actually a number of things in health, in education, in income generation that could be transformational. And we're now working to scale those directly. We're also thinking just much more broadly about how do we build an ecosystem of funders, of other NGOs? Can we incubate new ones to take this on? And so that's a very long-winded way of saying basically, Ben, I think there's a lot we need to do, but humans are very adaptable and we have agency. And so there is an ability to shape the future in the way that we want to. And so I can speak to it from the lens that in the hat that I wear, but I think that individuals in government can be thinking about this, in companies, right? we have that ability to shape the outcomes positively and ensure that actually AI is a force for benefits much more broadly. Um, and maybe even just taking a step back on like how we could see negative outcomes in the global south. I think a lot about the fact that if the US, Europe actually uses AI to create hyper personalized education, hyper personalized healthcare, you could get to a situation where incomes go up really dramatically and just overall livelihoods. And Africa doesn't uptake it, for example, or does it at very low rates. At that point, you actually have a 10xing potentially in the inequality globally. Alternatively, if you use AI effectively, we can get to a place where, there's massive doctor shortages in the countries that I'm talking about, right? Where you're actually leapfrogging the lack of high quality diagnosis in healthcare and are using AI to actually improve healthcare really, really significantly. And so I think there are really positive case scenarios of AI, AGI, ASI, what have you. And I think there's some really negative cases that could occur. And I think we need to be working across society to be driving to those positive cases.
Yeah, let's stay on the positive for a bit, because you're saying there's a lot of positives and there's saying there's potential negatives, but you didn't say sort of how. Here we are, like in a way, this is meant to be like a public awareness campaign. Like, what do people need to be doing, that drives positive outcomes? Because I think one of the ways that people their knee jerk is like resist data centers, stop the rollout of AI. And I don't think that's what you mean. So how maybe you could do a stylized like story of like how does AI roll out over the next 3 to 5 years or 2 to 3 years, where you seeing it hit one positive milestone after another in terms of people, not in terms of technology.
Let me start where I've been spending a lot of my time, which is on this work in the global south. So as an example right now, there's 475 million smallholder farmers. Those farmers actually across Latin America, Asia, Africa, they earn $1,500 a year. They are very dependent on forecasts. And forecasts actually are, the weather is getting increasingly unreliable and unpredictable with climate change. Right now, most of those farmers do not get high quality forecasts. They may not get any forecasts at all. They may get them, right before they need to make a decision, such that they can't make a decision because it takes a long time to get physics-based forecasts available for these geographies. And AI actually transforms that picture. You can get forecasts that are much, much more accurate, much faster, more local, and it costs like fractions of pennies to deliver this directly to farmers' phones or via WhatsApp. And so we are actually working over the next, I don't think it will be 2 to 3 years. It's going to take time to get it out to, tens, hundreds of millions of people. But there is a very, very feasible pathway to getting this information into the hands of tens, hundreds of millions of farmers. What's exciting about it is that like it's not just getting the forecasts. We used actually in India this year to reach 1 million farmers. We used the AI to translate dry local guidance that was text-based into voice messages, which is really helpful for illiterate farmers. We translated it into in local languages, which the LLM was able to do. We translated it into image-based. We're thinking of doing some like recursive learning on what messages are most effective. And so you could get to a place where at just an incredibly low cost, you're able to deliver high quality messaging that can improve incomes and welfare in the billions annually, um, quite easily. And so that's a positive case. I'd say another positive case that we're looking at is clinical decision support. Uh, AI has been shown even today to deliver very high quality healthcare with actually like pretty good patient friendliness. There was a study that was done that actually showed that many clinicians rated the advice from the AI as more empathetic and sort of patient friendly, as well as more accurate than a typical diagnosis. And so there are many countries in Asia and Africa where diagnosis rates or misdiagnosis rates are upwards of 50%. So less than 1 in 2 people, or about 1 in 2 people, get diagnosed accurately. Rural specialist shortages are something like 80%. And then you have opportunities like India. You have this amazing telemedicine system that's already operational. What's exciting about it is you have hundreds of millions of consults that are happening. As an example, you could actually embed AI quite centrally and use that to dramatically improve the diagnosis, to shorten wait times, and have very rapid reach across India. And that's not just India. That could then happen across multiple systems in Africa. And so those are just a couple of the options that come to mind. But if you look at it, we're talking about dramatically improving diagnosis and addressing massive doctor shortages. We're talking about improving income by the billions. There's also some really exciting education initiatives. AI can provide just hyper personalized education. To paint a picture of that, there are about 617 million students in lower income countries who fail minimum proficiency in reading and math, and 70% of 10-year-olds can't read a simple text. There's a huge teacher shortage, and it's only getting worse. And there's now randomized control trial evidence from Ghana and Nigeria that AI tutoring helped produce 1 to 2 years of schooling gains in just a few months of use. And so, that's a pretty stunning number. Obviously, you have to go from pilot to real world. But I think what we're starting to see is just this promise of AI to, if leveraged well, to drive dramatic improvements in some of the areas that the global South has struggled with most. And if you take that and extend it, those are the similar gains that you could be seeing for lower access regions in the US. You can envision a world where we're able to drive just improvements in morbidity and mortality. There's obviously the massive improvements that are available in terms of scientific breakthroughs for medications, including some of the hardest to treat medications, and that applies worldwide. Actually, there's richer data in the developed world, so I think we'll see more of those gains here, at least initially. And so, yeah, I don't know, Ben, there's like a lot of really wonderful things that can come about. And it's really thinking about how do you harness those and how do you drive them, because they don't happen totally organically. That's I guess maybe the PSA is think about the thing you care about and then say what is it that's needed to sort of bring it into the world.
Yeah, I think that if it's in a way, if AI is limited, like not super intelligence, but it helps people make better decisions, it's better education, better healthcare, that people actually will love it. People are very supportive. It's where it gets better than them. It's where it takes away their jobs. It's where they are displaced, that people are no longer supportive, right? And so I think it's okay, AI actually is a better doctor and a better teacher and a better decision maker than 99% of people or 100% of people. Most people are not on board saying that's a great idea, but I think that's what people at these AI labs, or at least some of the people at AI labs, think's going to happen. And I'm saying, okay, well, if that's true, which I'm saying, I'm accepting the premise. Okay, like it's not going to replace a subsistence farmer. And most people in America who are voters will be like, well, great. I hope the subsistence farmer does better. But what about me? Like, what about me? Like, what's going to happen to me if I don't have a job?
So there, I think going back to your question, what do I think needs to happen? I would say we need to there are two things to separate out. There is actually, will the AI technology move as quickly as people think it might, right? Whether it's over 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, it is very fast in human history. And so there's that piece. The second piece actually is, how do we adapt, right? We may actually find that AI is only beneficial as an augmentation of teachers, but that ultimately an AI cannot stand at the front of the class and tell the kids to behave and understand the social dynamics and manage them, right? And so then you still need the teacher for that human element of it, right? That's just one very simplistic
Yeah, but
example.
that's the world where I think society would be happy. But when I met you, you were with another person. I'm not going to say her name, but she's a senior person in AI lab, and I was asking her about like, did she really believe that AI is just going to become super intelligent? And she was like, yeah, I totally believe that. And I was like, what about all the physical world? She's like, well, AI will build robots. And then I said to her, yeah, but isn't there some limit? And she said, I guess there's a limit to how many robots it could build.
You totally see her saying that.
Yeah, and I was like, oh my God. And so there's these people who are really, really close to the actual like nuclear fusion who believe it's going to infinity. And I'm trying to accept the premise because I think it helps. In some ways, the extreme view helps, um, like better illuminate what the potential could be. And yeah, but but I think it scares people.
Yeah, look, I think there's a world where I want to be honest. I am also a person who both thinks that is plausible. I actually think it's less about what the technology can do and more about what society is willing to accept and how humans operate. I have less of a question that actually AI could get there and that the robotic technology could get there. I think I have a more of a question of like, will children listen to a robot, right? As an example, like where will the limits of society and human interaction reach such that actually that creates its own natural ceiling? But to like, let's say that we have robot teachers and we have robot farmers and that is our
Mm-hmm.
future.
Mm-hmm.
I think then what we're starting to pivot to is how do we create meaning and purpose? And that to me probably falls along two different dimensions. One is how do we use AI to really improve upon our lives? And I think that, again, I've spent much more of my time thinking about that for the Global South, but I actually think a lot of the tenets are very similar. How do we use it to dramatically improve our quality of life, both mental health and physical health? How are we using AI to improve education? Education not as an instrumental usage, but actually as a way to enjoy and experience life and augment our knowledge base. How do we use AI to ensure that gains of AI are equitably and fairly distributed? Hopefully, knock on wood. I think that is something we really, really need to work very hard towards and is not a foregone conclusion. And so that's one sort of element of it. And then I think the second element in terms of painting a positive picture is saying, okay, we all now have a lot more time on our hands. What does human purpose look like in a post AGI world? And that's something I've thought a lot about. I have a 13-year-old, and I ask myself, what will his world look like um, if we do have the robot teachers and farmers? And I go back to thinking about, someone like my mom. Actually, she's 83 and she spent her whole life caring for other people, right? She cared for us. Now she actually volunteers at soup kitchens. She cares for like her elderly friends when they're sick, she takes them food. And actually, Ben, we act as though this is going to be this giant social experiment that's never been done. But actually, for like many generations of women, and actually many people across the global south, they haven't had access to paid work, right? For the expectation has been that they will be caretakers. And so they're actually, there's like I don't want to overplay that, but like there's a rough precedent for this in some ways. And I think many have found meaning in it. I think at a more societal level, what I want us to do is to really think about how we institutionalize caring and actually use it for a way to both drive human purpose and meaningful improvements. And so, as an example, one of my a good friend of mine, Vicky Hausman, is starting the American Service Project. So that's actually meant to reimagine and scale national service in the United States for the modern era. Anthropic's launched Claude Core. Claude Core is going out there and getting um, young people and placing 1,000 early career fellows in nonprofits. You can imagine like similar efforts globally, revitalized Peace Corps, um, more equivalent that's targeted at all ages, and really thinking about what are the physical problems in the world that we could be addressing. And so, I guess if I were to sort of pull back on this, what do I see as the key pieces of a positive future? One is we're really, really thoughtful about deploying AI in ways that actually meaningfully improve people's lives. Two, we're starting to think about how we use that excess energy. I am more of the carer archetype. Others may have different, you may have academics, you may have, various others who have other ways of continuing to like advance and find that purpose. But how do we actually create like really thoughtful, institutionalized scale channels to harvest and harness these energies, and prevent societal disruption? And then three, how do we work towards more equitable distribution of AI benefits? Because I think it's both important for the world and it's also just really important for global stability. I think having a massive underclass is not what we want, both from an ethical perspective, but also from just like a social stability perspective.
Okay, there's a lot in what you just said.
I was going to say, you asked me to riff, so I'm just riffing. I'm more focused on the next 10 years, so I haven't spent as much of my time on the full transformation, but yeah, that's where I think I'd end up.
But I feel like I think you put your finger on the pressure points. The limit is what society will accept.
Yeah.
I think let me just stay on that for a minute, because I feel like most of your experience, and this is me having read about you and talked to you a little bit, like that most of your experience in change management in the global South is actually what society is about. The change. It's not about the technology. It's not about actually fundraising. It's actually like,
yes,
how do you get this change, this medicine into the people's daily lives, and the change is the hardest impediment.
That's exactly right. Yes. Now, I will say a lot of the change is government systems. And government systems are inherently built to be risk averse, to be slower moving. I do ask myself, to the extent that that if it is more driven by like private sector uptake, then I could see a faster uptake. I'm thinking more of AI, but I think the cap will be, is there enough societal backlash? And then you could foresee regulation coming in, for example.
Foresee, I guarantee. But
I was trying to be diplomatic.
But if I think about some of the projects you've done, with like deworming or HIV or clean water, like every single time, it felt like what made it work was that you made it easy for people, not that it was like making it easy was the magic that made it like scale.
Making it easy was the magic. Yeah, it's with our deworming work. So just deworming, it costs like 50 cents per kid, and it's been shown that for every dollar you spend, the kids are on their income's improved $169 over their lifetime. So just like an unbelievable bet. And when we started this work, we were in like 2012, a handful of kids were getting the treatment. And we kept, people kept trying to deliver via clinics. It was sort of ad hoc treatment and it wasn't scaling. And so we said, what's the simplest way to do it? And we actually started doing it in schools. And so you're meeting the kids where they're at. And then we did mass deworming days. So it was like once or twice a year. So there was a big logistics push. And so, yeah, we made it easy. We made it easy because we were meeting the kids where they were at. We made it easy because it was a single day. We made it easy because it was turnkey. And yeah, I think that's the magic. And even as we're picking like a lot of the stuff for the AI Access Initiative, one of our big pieces is this tractable? Does anybody need to change their behavior? If not, like that's a big thumbs up, right? And yeah, so I think simplicity is really important.
Yeah, because I think about the two things that people dislike most about AI, I think, is they're worried about it affecting them economically, and they're worried about change.
That's right.
And I actually feel like, and it's like, I feel like this is, most people in AI will say this, that this is a pie expanding technology. So it's not really about scarcity, it's about abundance. The analogy I was thinking about earlier today is that, for most of human history, so let's say 100,000 years, caloric scarcity was what defined our entire life. You never had enough fats and sugars. And then in the last 30 or 40 years, we had sort of like completely fats and sugars are infinite. You can have as much fats and sugars as you want. You can have as much calories as you want. And our society never sort of knew how to deal with that problem. Right. So I think that's what's going to happen with AI. We're going to have an abundance problem, not a scarcity problem. And then in that situation, and in this case, it'll be abundance of economics. And the challenge is going to be, where do you find meaning and purpose if you essentially, like most of your day, most of your time was spent earning money, right? You no longer have to do that, but actually you don't know what your identity is if you don't do that. And most people, maybe I can, not to be too un-PC, but a lot of men find their identity in work, especially. Like really, like it's like very male, in my opinion. So okay, no work, no purpose, no joy. And that's when you said this archetype. I think of you as a carer. You're trying to care about the world. I have some friends who never think about that. They think about building things or exploring the universe, whatever their thing is. And if they could somehow see AIs encouraging that passion, like it lets them get to the stars or lets them whatever it is that they care, that basically defines their inner self. Like they would all of a sudden see it as a positive, and they wouldn't be thinking about it as a zero-sum game or, give me universal basic income. They'd be thinking about like, what does this enable me to do? But I think that's hard because changing people, changing behavior is the hardest thing of all the things you try. You're saying that's the thing you try to avoid most of all the, when you're trying to fix the dimensions by which you're trying to make positive impact. Just don't change people's behaviors and you're in good shape.
Yeah, and when you think about it, there's like so many dimensions of change that we're talking about, right? So first, we're asking people to envision an underlying pace of change that has never happened in an abstract way with something that seems like a black box. That gets to our earlier discussion about the scaling laws and like why it's hard to even like fathom this, right? That's one. I think two is there's a lot of pretty legitimate fears, right? Before you could unblock using AI to get to the moon, you have to get over the fact that you don't have the job you've done, that you built your whole identity around, right? And so there's fear of how will society manage this, right? Will we actually get to the UBI? Will the UBI be enough? Right? And then there's the like, if I do have all of that taken care of, like how do I shift to that state? But I think those are all the very legitimate concerns that people have. And also, I'm like you, Ben. I think that if we would deploy AI well, we are talking about abundance, right? We are talking about a different frontier of what we can be accomplishing medically, scientifically, economically. If we can get those gains distributed sufficiently equitably, I think everybody has more to benefit from, first. Second, I like you, I get a lot of my purpose from work. It would be very hard for me to, uh, it is scary. Like I think about it. I think about it for my son and what will get him up in the morning, for example, when he's an adult, if there's no work. But I do think this unlock of saying, can we re-envision what we're doing with AI as a lever is a really, really interesting one. And can we use AI as a force multiplier to do even more?
So if you had AGI or even super intelligence and you're running AI access initiative and you're trying to affect 3.5 billion people and you have the super intelligence in your area, what do you do? Like, what do you change?
I mean, I think I use AI as a force multiplier to actually say across all of these areas, what do we need to get done, right? And maybe it just massively multiplies what we can be doing, right? Instead of me building an institution, I haven't thought about this, Ben, so I'm riffing, but like instead of me building a 100-person organization to take forward the health work, right? Maybe I'm able to have I still think you're going to need the relationship elements with governments. I still think there's going to be like some human interaction. We will find out. But I use that as a force multiplier to achieve the objectives. And instead of reaching tens or hundreds of millions of people, now maybe my goal is hundreds of millions or billions, right? Instead of saying I'm going to do it in 2 areas, maybe we're able to do it in 4 areas. And so for me, it really like lets you step up the audacity of what you're trying to do. Maybe instead of saying we're just going to improve diagnosis, maybe I'm using AI to transform how national health systems push out drugs and connecting it to supply chains so that when there's a diagnosis, like the medicines are there. I don't know. I think there's a lot of moonshots we start being able to go for.
It just seems like everything you're saying, the sort of the possibilities of AI bias towards people who have certain proclivities, willing to take moonshots, willing to change, willing to do more. A lot of people like to be told. I mean, maybe not literally, but they want a place in society, not to like define their own place in society, right? Like the 1950s view of like, man, I just want like social recognition and a job that's safe. I don't want to go out and be an entrepreneur and take all that risk and every day just be completely new and different and uncertainty. People hate uncertainty. And so, but you're describing a world where the people who are most comfortable in uncertainty, most comfortable with uncertainty are the ones doing great. But what about everybody else who feel overwhelmed?
Such an interesting question. I mean, now you're taking me out of my comfort zone, Ben, into bigger questions I haven't spent as much time pondering. I would say that then for those, we need to start thinking through what solutions or what options exist, right? Maybe they're more involved in things that involve the physical world and that are more routine, more building, more, I don't know. What's your take on this, Ben? It's a really, really interesting question.
I mean, I'm assuming that this AI you're describing that we're accepting, the super AI, ends up being the one that decides a lot of this. And so some people won't like this, but it will know a lot about my son and it will say, okay, this is actually what I think my son would really like. And then it would put those things in front of my son and those things would be hard, but achievable. And it sort of becomes like you're maybe a mentor if you're on one way, or it's like a game designer. Another way to think of it is, and because in a world where the AGI, there's still problems. There's no such thing as a world without problems. And as long as there's problems, there's purpose for people.
That's right.
And so so AI is helping us solve problems and pick problems that fit, each one of us in a more customized way, rather than like, back in the 1950s, everybody had to wear a suit and go work at IBM, and that a lot of people weren't allowed to or didn't want to do that. So I see AI as the problem and the solution, but I think that there's a lot of people who won't trust that, don't trust it. Maybe they shouldn't trust it because, as you said, it's highly contingent on a good AI with good decision makers having it actually like produce decisions that are good for not just like a trillionaire, but also for everyone else.
Yeah, super interesting. So it almost feels like you're talking about like a hyper customization of everyone's purpose. And so some people may actually want the purpose. Others may just love spending their day playing chess and mahjong and whatever, right? And you can create that sort of world. And others may really enjoy being in the physical world and going out and building houses with habitat or what have you, right? And so, but the ability for AI to really tailor and say, okay, you actually really enjoy sort of this set thing. Let's create that like environment. It's a really intriguing idea, Ben.
I mean, the thing I feel like is the worst idea is the only idea everybody in AI world talks about, which is universal basic income, UBI, which 20 years ago everybody called welfare. Like, I don't think taking everybody and making them unemployed and then giving them like money from the government or an AI lab is going to have good outcomes. Is it what people really want and really need is purpose, meaning, and work. Whether that work is, being an exhibitionist and being the most popular person on Twitter. Like it's an activity. It's not no activity. I think that's a recipe for a revolution. But anyways, that's why I wanted to have this conversation, have people start to develop other kinds of ideas that I think are more likely to be successful, that moves the society's limit up to accept change.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah, so I think that one thing I'd call out is that your premise is that being paid is actually what gives, it felt like a little bit like getting paid gives purpose. I think you can divorce those two. And again, that's why I was using the generation of women who didn't have access to work, but their purpose was caring for their kids and their families and their communities, right? So I do think there is some decoupling of that. I think in our society, there's a sort of combining of being paid and status and identity and what you do with your day. And so just to say, like, I think there could be some decoupling of that would be useful to like move forward. And then, yeah. And I think what I was saying is really, are there mechanisms to institutionalize? And I think this gets back to the point you were making of like, some people just want to know what their job is day to day, whether they're paid for it, whether they're not. And so to me, that does get to how do we create institutional solutions so that this may be like more trusted, whether that's like a national service corps, which could be deployed domestically. What was it during Hoover? Did they have something where they were like building a bunch of things? Right? There's plenty of infrastructure we need, even in the U.S., that's out there working in like less developed countries. There's a ton that needs to be done there from a physical basis. You could set up those types of core. There could be other things for like academic tracks or something. But I think I really like the idea of saying, okay, across society, in this AGI world, what are tracks that people could be pursuing and seeing if we can go after it. I would say the other thing that I would be really excited about is, I think uncertainty increases the resistance to change. So I think the more that we can actually have sort of a pathway of saying like, okay, we actually think that here are flags that AI is moving at a certain pace, but also here's flags that like society is actually able to like metabolize and digest it. And we're able to get signals on jobs, which jobs are more affected, which jobs are less, which regions, etc. I think that will immensely ground our policy solutions. And so my push, which is like less, I guess like completely blue sky, but is more thinking about like a transition, whether that's 10 years, whether that's 50 years, would be to argue for much better data about what is actually happening in the world, combined with much more iterative policy making and solutioning. You and I are like pie in the skying it, but like there could be a lot more work to be like, okay, we tried this, that really worked, that was a real failure. And then actually then saying, how do we cost and actually get these to scale? And so I think that work, the more chaotic, the more uncertain change feels, the harder it is for people to accept. And right now, I think part of what's so hard is that it just all feels ungrounded.
Yeah. It makes me kind of go to a different question, which is that like, I feel like where I'm doing is the kind of classic mistake of an intellectual. So you can imagine a world where AI enables, as you said, like a special track for every person. It's super customized. But at the end of the day, you're describing sort of a central planning kind of concept. Now it's central planning in the sense that it's centrally planned by not people. And so maybe it works better. But the Achilles heel to central planning is authoritarianism. And people don't trust authoritarian power, like for lots of good reasons. And so it goes back to the central question of like, well, okay, I might be able to do that, but who decides? Like, there's this question of some group of people deciding how AI gets built, how AI gets distributed. Like it has for it to have good outcomes. It's not just the AI labs. It's not just the governments. There's a lot of, but like how does that this is as transformative as we're accepting, within 5 years, well, you have better have gotten this right. So how does that happen?
I don't think we should accept that it's the government or an AI labs alone doing this. I think we need to have individual actors, leaders, testing, monitoring, ideating, scaling ideas that work. Because I think the more I think the planning can happen at different levels. It can happen at a national government level, at a state level. It can happen with corporations. It can happen with what I'm doing, which is an NGO trying to figure out how to do it, right? It can be happening at philanthropic level. But to me, it's really saying, what is the future we want to build to? And then how do we, at both a public and a private level, gather the information, resourcing, solutioning we need? Because I think I guess the alternative I was sort of envisioning is not that you were suggesting that, but I think there is a not crazy world where this just the pace of everything takes people by surprise. The combination of change resistance, uncertainty, black boxiness of AI results in a place where we haven't thought through those questions. And 5 years from now, we're sort of scrambling to, or 10 years or 50, whatever, scrambling to adjust. And I think my push is more to say, okay, at every level, every node that is out there, to actually say, okay, what are the potential scenarios? Let's say I lead a massive corporation. What would be signals that actually my company is likely to undertake massive layoffs in the coming years, right? How am I responding to that? How am I actually testing, iterating, watching what others in the industry have done? I think that's influential. And I also think the government doing that is very helpful. So I don't think you can get away from the government ideally having an important role in all of this, or multiple governments, but I do think there's private citizens have a really important role to play as well. I don't know. What do you think, Ben?
There's sort of two different ways to answer the question. It's like, what can I do, and what should someone do?
Yep.
And so I think what I'm trying to do is I think that the amount of success of AI is going to be dictated by, I think, as you said, the limit at which we can accept the change that needs to happen. And that the response of resisting that change makes it less likely to have good outcomes. And embracing the change is actually will drive the success we want. And you embrace that change by having conversations like this and having more people think it through. Not that you're thinking it through because you're going to actually be able to make a good decision ahead of time, but you're mentally prepared for that change. Because I think that in my experience as an entrepreneur, after now 15 years, 20 years doing it, nothing works in theory. Everything works in practice. And so I'm not saying that we should come up with a theoretical framework, some master framework that will hold true over the next 5 years. I'm saying, at least what I can do is, I think this, if we see change as positive, not change as negative, then we're a long way there towards success. And there's a separate thing. What should someone do? Someone with authority, someone who's in power. I think that's a lot harder. I don't know the answer to that one. Hopefully they are selfless, right? Hopefully they are worried. But I don't know what the answer is.
I think that's exactly right. We talk a lot at 2AI about trying to find solutions that are evergreen, where if AGI comes in 2 years, the solutions are good. If it comes in 15 years, it was also good, right? And that's not always the case. I think we need to have sort of, again, and we call it short and long timelines, right? We need to have a variety of timelines and do some scenario planning. But the prerequisite for any of that is accepting that there are fast timeline situations.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I would argue whether it's 2 years or 15 years, that is a fast timeline in human history, right? And then once you've accepted that, and I think your point is a good one, which is let's do sessions like this where we're no, let's actually accept the premise that this has happened, that seems wild. And then from there, we can actually start doing some planning. And then as an entrepreneur, I found exactly the same thing as you, which is I call it like learning by contact. One of my former military colleagues share that. But the more that you're actually getting in there and grappling with the problem and having other smart people grapple with it and trying one thing and failing, and you're at least in there and you're advancing the frontier of your thinking and knowledge. And I think we just need a lot more of that along a lot more dimensions of this problem societally.
Yeah. I think most entrepreneurs learn similar things. And so Jeff Bezos is famous for this idea of working backwards. And the way I think about it is you have to know what you want.
Yep.
And so we're both talking about some world where AI is enabling abundance and purpose. And you're going to work backwards from that, but you don't have any idea how.
Yes.
And that's the reality. And everybody, that doesn't satisfy most of my team because they want to know, like, okay, now tell me exactly what we're going to do. I was like, I have no idea. Let's get going and we'll figure it out as we go. And that's where I think the society is at the moment. They don't like that. People don't like that sense of change and uncertainty.
That's such a good point. Like we even started for the AI Access Initiative. I'm like, we're going to start with a few big bets. And then as I look at those big bets, to be transparent, I'm like, it's both so important and so not fitting the overall need. But I see it as an entry point to that learning by contact and saying, okay, like now we're seeing this. We've assembled a lot of really smart people running at this with the right relationships. And now we can expand out from there. But I think the thing not to do is to sort of say, okay, I am paralyzed. I feel like we need to be moving with urgency with our best possible hypotheses and then testing against those and iterating and sort of expanding our approaches as we learn what works. So yeah, I 100% agree.
So as we sort of as we finish up this episode and I think about the next year or two, are there certain signs you're looking for? Like as people try to embrace change positively, like what are because I think it's going to be faster than everybody expects. It's going to happen slowly than all at once. And I think it's within 5 years. So it's, 5 years is like one college graduation, right? So what are the things you're looking at as you keep track of the pace of change?
I am looking at the capabilities of the model themselves, looking at a range of tests. I mentioned the meter is just one, but like there are a range of capability assessments of AI that are out there, as well as just what the labs are sharing themselves. So really tracking the capabilities of the model as well as the risks of the model. And then separately looking at signs of societal adoption. The job losses is kind of a messy figure, but I'm very closely watching data on that. I'm also listening to the anecdotal reports on where, various companies, I heard one company recently that had said they're hiring a lot more AI native junior people and then much more senior people. And it's actually the mid-level people who they're not hiring, but just starting to see what some of those curves look like for job loss. But again, my expectation is that we may see much more rapid gains in the AI models and slower societal adoption. But I still don't think it'll be that slow, especially where there's profit incentives to drive that change.
Yeah, Tyler Cowen calls that the diffusion problem.
Yes, the diffusion problem. Yes. I'm hoping on the diffusion problem. Look, I'm hoping AI moves slower. I was told the Anthropic team. And I'm hoping for slower diffusion. I think society needs a lot more time to prepare.
Yeah. Yeah, the negative of diffusion is that I think it causes more asymmetry.
That's fair.
So people who have embraced it are seeing 1,000 times gains, and then sectors that haven't are just still in the Stone Ages. And so it's and that I don't know what percentage of societal strife is from feelings of disparity, feelings of like unfair allocation of opportunity or resources, but some huge part. and so if we're going to be in a world where diffusion is the problem, then distribution is the main question.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that to me, distribution is one of the central questions. Once you get past the big things like AI model alignment, some of the major risks from biosecurity, nuclear, to me, the distribution question is really core.
Since I have you, I'll give you I think it's the solution to that is universal basic ownership. It's everybody gets percentage ownership, not government ownership, but like literally like Trump accounts, like where everybody got, an account. I would give shares to every, I don't know if I can go to every person in the world, but it's about ownership society. And that's really like what I think changes how people feel about things, the endowment effect, they call it. And so I don't know how you would do that, but I think that would be the kind of path dependent change. In retrospect, everything downstream of that becomes possible.
Super fascinating. Yeah. It's interesting, Ben.
Well, anyways, okay. Thanks for letting me also spat off here.
No, this was so fun. This was great.
Well, I really appreciate taking the time. I mean, I think what you're doing is critically important for so many reasons. And and I love that you're doing. I love that all the people around you like wanted you to do it too. Like it's like such a positive sign that people in your world, like it's like one often said, this is the problem one of the main problems they want to solve. Like that's a good sign. Looking for signs of it's heading in the right direction. Like you're one of them.
Thank you, Ben. I so appreciate that. And I appreciate you doing this podcast. I think the more we can all get on the same page about the potential outcomes, I think the better this is all going to go. And so thought experience like this of saying, let's assume what seems crazy to people and start from that premise, I think are phenomenal. So thanks for having me.
All right. Onward.
You've been listening to Onward. We invite you again to please send your comments and questions to onward@fundrise.com. If you like what you've heard, rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. And be sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. For more information on Fundrise sponsored investment products, including relevant legal disclaimers, check out our show notes.